Hi, I'm Tom from Moto Morgana. Welcome to Roadside Repairs. Today I'm going to show you how to change the chain and sprockets on a bike. I'm going to show you how to do it on this bike. It's a KTM 990 Adventure, but the procedure is basically the same for any other bike. I'm going to show you how to do this using just basic tools that you can find in any basic workshop. And the specialized tools we use are that lightweight and small that you can take them on a trip easily. What we're going to do is we're going to first break the chain, then remove the rear wheel. We're going to swap the rear sprocket, we're going to swap the front sprocket, we're going to put on a new chain, rivet it back together and adjust the chain tension, and then we should be good to go. So the parts we need to do this are first of all, of course, a chain, including the connecting link. It's a hollow pin type link for a good reason. I'm going to explain you that later on when we come to the chain, the riveting part of the chain. We need a front sprocket, and of course we need the rear sprocket. Now these four parts should do it. You could also include the spacer, which goes behind the front sprocket, but I'll explain you later on how you can reuse the one that is on the bike right now. So what tools do we need to do this job? Well, on this side I have the tools I take with me on a trip. This is something that you will easily find in a basic workshop. Well, apart from this torque wrench, I took a torque wrench because I couldn't find any other wrench this length, but a normal wrench will do here. So what do we have in our panniers is a 32mm spanner for the rear wheel, a basic screwdriver, an adjustable wrench, a 17mm spanner, an Allen key. I don't know which size this is, but it fits nicely in the back of this this tool. And this is a chain breaker and riveting tool. It's from terra-x. It's nice, small, works good, it's very light, and I always carry it with me. Now on the other hand, we have the tools that we can find in the workshops. A 13mm wrench comes in handy, another 17mm wrench, a hammer and a few nails, a large ratchet and a medium-sized ratchet. Now using these tools you should be able to do the job. Okay, so this is the terra-x chain braking and riveting tool. It's a very small tool. It's lightweight. It only weighs 155 grams, so you can basically take it anywhere in your luggage. It's a lot smaller and lighter than comparable tools that I've seen. Now we're going to use it to break the chain, and as you can see on the back there's a little grub screw with a ball bearing in it. This one, we don't need it right now. We're going to use it later on whenever we're going to do the riveting part. So I'm going to remove it. And we just need this part of the tool. So here you can see a pin. This pin in the tool will be used to drive out the pin in the chain. So I'm going to open it up completely. Open this one up as well. And then you're just going to put it over whatever pin you choose. I'm going to choose this one here. You put it over it. You make sure it's like this, hand tightened. You don't need a tool for that part. I'm going to take a look if it's done correctly. Alright. And what you need then is this. It's a 13mm spanner and a 17mm spanner. The 17mm goes on the back, the 13 millimeters goes on this one, and then we're going to just turn. And in the beginning you're going to feel a lot of resistance. So, and then all of a sudden you should hear a noise that the pin or the edges of the pin are broken, and you can just drive it out and you will feel the resistance go down. So, well, I actually didn't hear a clicking noise, but the resistance is a lot less than in the beginning. And what we basically do is, using this tool, as said, we're driving out or pushing out the chain link pin, and it will just fall out from the rear of the tool. So here we are. We've pushed the pin through, and you see it comes out nice and cleanly. So basically now the chain is broken, so what we can do is we can remove the tool just like this, and what we see is our chain just comes apart like this, and we can remove it. Okay, so make sure your gear is in neutral, and this is the old chain. As you can see here, well, this is the old rear sprocket. It's missing a tooth here, it's missing a tooth here, and basically it's missing a whole lot of teeth here and there. So this one's pretty worn. Most people would say this is far beyond the limit to replace the sprocket, but hey, whenever you're on a main trip and you don't have another sprocket, what you're gonna do? So it still works. The chain was not slipping, but now I think it's about time to change it. Alright, so next step, we're going to remove the rear wheel, and I'm going to do that using the onboard tools provided by KTM. This is a 90 Newton meter spec, so by hand it's going to be a little bit difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my foot on it, I'm going to push it down, and that's a lot easier. So remove this one like that, and we don't want to loosen this nut all the way. We're just gonna leave like 2 tours on it, and we're gonna like smash the axle out like that. So if I push this one here, and then on the other side we can take the axle just like this and pull it out, and then we have one axle in our hands. I'm going to put this aside, and just roll the rear wheel out like this. Now something I forgot to tell you guys is whenever you do this and your bike is loaded or the fuel tank is empty, it might be possible that the rear is tilting backwards. So whenever I do this on a trip, most of the time I just put a heavy weight on the front of the bike. I just tie my luggage to the front so that the front becomes a little bit heavier, and that the bike won't tilt backwards and doesn't fall on you. So this is a sprocket we want to change. As you see, we can just lift it, we can take it off like that. It's not screwed together or whatever. And what you see here, as already shown, is like some teeth that broke off. And if you take a good look at the shape of the teeth, here you can see that it's not parallel, so it's not even. It's kind of worn out. It has not a perfectly round shape, and that's a major sign that you should change your rear sprocket. As you see here, this is the sprocket itself. This is some kind of a hub where the sprocket is screwed to. Here we have different nuts. What we're going to do is we're going to loosen these nuts, take this sprocket off, put on a new one, and then tighten the nuts up, and we can put it back on the rear wheel. So before we can remove these nuts, we should make something to hold back the sprocket, because whenever we're going to take it in our hands and try to remove these nuts, it's not going to work because we don't have enough strength to hold this back. So what I usually use, a little piece of board you can find anywhere, put a couple of nails in it that hold your sprocket back, and then take whatever ratchet or spanner that you can find, put your knee on here, and then you start removing these nuts. So remove that. Don't throw these away because we're going to reuse them. Alright, here we are. Take off your sprocket from your homemade sprocket holding tool, or whatever you want to call it, and just pop these screws out like that. There we go. Yep. Okay, so these have come out. This is the sprocket hub. This is the sprocket itself, and as you can see, it's yeah, totally worn, so don't reuse it anymore if it looks like this. Just throw it away. And I have a sprocket here which looks pretty good. It's not a new one, it's a used one, but it's in very good condition. So I'm gonna put this on my sprocket hub like that, just aligning the holes like this. Put in the screws. You might give them a little clean if necessary. Put in the screws just like that. Flip it over just like this. Just for security reasons, I put on a dab of Loctite. I get them in these tiny little tubes. This is blue Loctite. It's not liquid, it's semi-solid, and I take this on every trip. It's very practical. It doesn't weigh anything. I think it's less than 10 grams. Very small. So what I do is I just put a dab of Loctite on every screw. Well, the correct spec on this bike calls for 1550 Newton meters. Well, we're not carrying a torque wrench on a trip like this, and it's well, most probably that you won't find a torque wrench in a basic workshop around somewhere in another country, in a faraway country. So what we're going to do is take a ratchet and tighten them up as hard as we can. Don't take a big ratchet, take a medium-sized one, because with a big one you're gonna damage the screws. So we're back to our homemade tool. Well, this nail can use a little bit, little tap of the hammer. So put this on here, hold it back and tighten it up like this. And we're going to do the same thing for the other screws. So our sprocket and hub are screwed together. So what we're going to do is put it back on the wheel hub with a little push, and then we're ready to reinstall the rear wheel. What we're going to do is we're going to push the wheel back in, correctly align all this, and as you can see here, this is the, well, basically the brake disc, and the brake disc should fit back right into this this opening between the brake pads. Now, to give you a little bit more room, what you can do is you take a tire lever that you probably have on your in your luggage as well, and you kind of push it open like this. Don't be afraid, you can push it all the way open, and then you have a lot more room to do it. And then we'll push the wheel back in like that. So now we're going to simply reinstall the rear axle. It's a little bit, yeah, finding the right position for the hole like this, but once you found it, you can just slide the rear axle back in and push it like all the way through on the other side as well. Like that. On the other side, we're going to put our nut back on. We're not going to tighten it yet, because later on we have to reposition the rear wheel to get the right chain adjustment. So I'm just going to put it back on hand tight, nothing more than that. And then this part, changing the rear sprocket, is done. Alright, up to the next sprocket, the front one. The front sprocket is behind this cover, which is secured with 3 screws. So we're going to remove the screws like that. You might have to lift your gear lever to have access to the bottom one. So this is it, and as you can see, well, this one's pretty worn as well. It's just like the rear one, it's pretty much oval shaped. So what we see here is the nut. We're going to remove that one, but behind the nut there's a little kind of a spacer like thing, which has one side bend in order to secure the nut. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a chisel and a hammer, and we're going to tap that one flat again, so that we can have access to the nut and that we can remove it. Okay, so we have our chisel, and we're going to try to get in between the nut and the spacer like thing. Try not to damage it too much, because yeah, obviously you're going to try to reuse it. As you can see, this, as soon as this is a little bit flatter, we will have access to the nut. We have our socket. You want to take a large ratchet wrench, because this one is, I think it's torqued up to 90 Newton meters. So with a small one you're going to have a hard time loosening that. This is obviously something you don't want to do along the road. You want to look for a workshop with some basic tools, and then you're gonna take a 32mm socket, put it into gear, and it's fairly easy to start removing this. So here we have it, the nut, the spacer. Oh, there it goes. Now this is the spacer. In a minute we're going to make it flat again so we can reuse it. And then there's the front sprocket. So here's a brand new one. It's a 16 teeth. Whenever you choose a 17 teeth front sprocket, you will have to remove the clutch slave as well, otherwise you won't be able to fit it in. But with a 16 teeth one you'll manage to do that. So we simply put it back on again, and then we have our spacer, little spacer, which is a bit bent. So what we can do is we put it on a hard surface, we give it a few taps with a hammer so it's flat again. Take your hammer, give it a few taps like that so that it's as flat as possible. You're never going to get it perfectly flat, but once it looks more or less like this, you should be okay. So then we're gonna put our little spacer back on, make sure it's well aligned. Now this this nut calls for a little bit of Loctite, so again we have our small tube that we carry with us on our trips. Apply a little bit of Loctite, just like that. That should do it. Not too much. And then we're gonna put our nut back on. So make sure that this little spacer stays aligned so that the dents and the holes made for these dents stay aligned. And then we're gonna tighten this one. This one calls for I think a 90 or 100 Newton meters, but whenever we're on a trip, normally we don't carry a torque wrench, so just make sure it's nice and snug. Here we go. Now the only thing we still have to do is bend this little lip of the this spacer so that the nut is secured, and therefore we're going to use our chisel again. So place it behind there. It's a little bit of fiddling to get it right, but you should be able to get something behind there. Yeah, here we go. So once you start bending it, it gets a little bit easier. Alright, so once it looks more or less like this, with this little spacer, or this little side of the spacer bent in order to lock the nut, we're done. So I was a little bit surprised to find a closed chain here. They usually ship me an open one, which is easier, but that means we will have to make it open, and therefore we use our little lightweight chain breaker again. So position it hand tight, screw in the pin until you feel resistance, and then take your 17mm spanner and your 13mm spanner and just drive the pin in. I'm going to take the ratchet side of this one. It's going to be a little bit faster and easier. Here it comes. Okay, there we go. There's one pin. So we'll remove this one and go on to the next link and the next pin of that same link. Well, it should fall out like this. Here it is. And the two pins are out now. And now we obviously have an open chain. Don't worry too much about these rubber rings, because they're supplied in the chain link as well. So don't worry if you damage them. You don't have to reuse them from here. So this is it. An open link here, an open link like there. So now we're gonna put on the chain. We're gonna put it on the rear sprocket like this, and then from there we'll try and put it on the front sprocket. So we want to put it in neutral. So you put it on here, give it a few turns, it should come out here at the bottom. Alright, here we are. This chain riveting tool only goes together with hollow type rivets. Now there's a good reason not to choose the clip type one either, because for that to rivet it together you don't even need a riveting tool. The reason for that is that clips are easily lost, especially when you do some off-roading, when you're riding through mud and everything. Chances are that the clip comes off. What else is in this little bag? There's a little bag of grease. We're going to use that in a minute. There's, well, 4. I only show you 2 right now, but there's 4 of these rubber X-rings, and of course there's the plate from the other side. So, well, you first put the chain back on. Right, like this. So the idea is the link, this link with the rings go through here. 2 rings on there, the plate on it, you press the plate on the link, and then you're going to rivet the hollow type pins here. So first thing, put a rubber X-ring on each of the pins. I'm going to open this little bag of grease. grease it just like this. Doesn't matter that it looks a bit dirty. Your hands will be black and greasy anyway. So this one goes through here, through the back. You might need to push the chain a little bit together so that it fits nicely. Then the other two X-rings go on just like this. There you go. Again, a little dab of grease, just like that. And then we're gonna push this plate on, well, by hand firstly, and then afterwards we're gonna use our tool to rivet it together. So this one's pushed on by hand. Now we should push it a little bit further, and for that we will need our little tool again. We don't need the braking pin, but we do need the grub screw that we removed before. So what I'm going to do is going to place this one over the chain like this. It should only be hand tight at first, like this, and then afterwards this one with the ball bearing to the inside of the tool goes in. So, and you want to screw it in until you feel the back of the pin. The idea is that by pushing on the plate, you don't remove, or you don't push the pin through. So there should be something behind the pin. It shouldn't be that tight, just if you feel the back of the pin, it should do it. Okay, so here's a little resistance. I'm going to stop there. Make sure that the little tool is positioned well, and then we're ready to push on the plate. So once you feel the resistance go up significantly, that means that the plate is pushed against the roller, and that's about as far as we want it to be pushed. So then we're going to back off. Push the other one just a little bit more. All right. So here we are. The plate is pushed over the pins, the hollow side of the pins, and now we're ready to rivet. So the idea is that our little ball bearing that you see on the inside here, there, behind my thumb, ball bearing fits in the hole here. We're going to squeeze that ball bearing in, and it's going to make the end of the pin just a little bit larger. Not much, only like 0.2, 0.3 millimeters, but you will notice the difference. Now, what we need here is we need to screw this grub screw a little bit in. The idea is that this flat surface may not push against this plate, but the ball bearing should push in this the hollow side of the link pin, and of course we're gonna use this pin as well, so we are screwing it in just like that. Install it. Now position your shackle in the tube, and then make sure that the ball bearing, and you're gonna feel it whenever the ball bearing is in this hole, but from the other pin there, is not gonna fall out anymore. So what we're gonna do here is tighten that up just a little bit, not too much, like that. And then we're going to start pushing the other pin against the ball bearing. Again, there will be a little bit of resistance, of course, and from the moment you feel the resistance is getting way too big, and you have the impression you're gonna break something, it's a good idea to take our tool off and to check and we first back off the other pin, and to check, of course, if we didn't go, or we're not going too far. Right. There we are. Okay. Well, this looks pretty good. So this is the result. You can see these pins are flared out, not that much, but you can see the difference with the original pin. I don't have one on hand right now, but there's a substantial difference in width of the pin end here, and with an uninstalled rivet link. So now we're ready to put the chain back on. So now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust the chain slack. As one of the major signs, if you need to adjust it again and again, that's one of the major signs that your chain is worn. But now I'm going to show you how to adjust the chain slack, and to do so we first need to back off this screw. So it might be a little bit tight, like that, and then with the other spanner we're gonna adjust this screw. We're gonna screw it in to give more slack, and we're gonna screw it out to give less slack. So if you're doing this, you're gonna have to make sure that you do exactly the same thing here as you do on the other side. And there's these little markings here on this block, these little markings here on this part, and depending on the position, you can copy that exact position to the other side. Now where we want to go to for this bike is a chain slack. This is a 42 teeth sprocket. Well, the user manual calls for a specific slack here in order not to put too much tension on the chain as the wheel goes up and down with the suspension. But well, I checked it beforehand. I can't remember the slack I need, but I know for this type of sprocket it's about a half to 1 centimeter below this little chain guard. So, well, actually it's pretty good. I'm not gonna do anything there anymore. So from the moment we're happy with the chain slack, we're holding back this screw here, and we're gonna retighten the backing screw here. Make sure it's tight, but don't over tighten it, because otherwise whenever you have to do some chain adjustment, you're gonna have a hard job loosening that. Alright, so chain installed, chain slack adjusted. So the only thing we still have to do is tighten this nut, and before we tighten it, we're gonna push our knee firmly against the rear wheel, and we're just tightening this nut with the onboard tool. I would just say tighten it as much as you can with your hands, and you should be good. This calls for I think a 90 Newton meter torque, but whenever you do it like this, it'll be okay. Yeah, that should do it. Alright, so this is it. We're ready to go now. Thank you for watching Moto Morgana's Roadside Repairs, and see you next time with some more repairs and information on bikes, stuff, gear on our around the world trip. Bye bye.